Hi and welcome to the fifth section of the Mastering TypeScript Programming Techniques course, Promises. In this section we'll learn how to work with promises, to replace callbacks with promises, and we'll learn what the callback hell is and how promises can help with that. So callback hell, or the pyramid of doom, is a state created by using callback style coding. Here's a typical example of what I mean. Notice how the structure of the code looks like a pyramid. In this code, we are attempting to read a directory and check each file for a temp extension, and if that condition is true, we want to delete the file from the folder. Now, such code comes with a lot of drawbacks. It's difficult to follow the flow of the application, especially if this would be a larger code, and it's also very difficult to do any sort of error handling. So promises help us to flatten the callback pyramid. Promises are a concept where we make a request and at some point in the future the code will either return a value or a reason for a failure. Therefore promises can have three states. First, it's going to be in a pending state, then they are either fulfilled, meaning that they return a value, or they get rejected, meaning that they should provide us with an error or an error message as well. Promises can be constructed natively, but in some cases, if you are using an older version of JavaScript, some polyfills or additional libraries may be required. In TypeScript, promises can be created by calling the new promise methods. We can subscribe to the promise by using the then method, and if we have another promise inside our then statement, we can call yet another then statement and keep on chaining them until required. So very simply put, a promise can return us a promise, which in turn can also return a promise, and we can subscribe to these by using multiple then statements. Let's go ahead and create a few promises and see them in action. The one thing to remember is that if we want to transpile our TypeScript code to JavaScript, we need to make sure that we target ES6, otherwise there will be a bunch of errors. So let's go ahead and put together a very simple promise. So as I said, a promise can either be resolved or rejected. So here, our promise is only going to resolve with a value of hello. We can then use this promise variable and call the .then method on it. Once our promise has resolved, then we want to output the response from our promise in the console. So I'm going to now transpile this TypeScript code to JavaScript and execute it with Node.js. And in fact, we get the hello value. So let's actually create another promise where we're going to utilize a function and return the promise as part of that function. So in this case, we're going to call our test function with a value, and we're going to resolve whatever value got sent as part of the promise. So this example is not really different from the previous one. We call our function, then we convert the response from the promise to be a number, because otherwise that is going to be an object, and we want to do some operations on that, but for now we very simply log the resulting number to the console, so we should see the value of 1 logged. So we need to again transpile our TypeScript and target ES6, and I'm going to execute node promise.js to see the result of this code. And in fact I get the value 1. And remember what we said earlier, that if you want, you can return a promise inside another promise. So here I could call my test function again with another value and then append my code with another then statement. So in my first then statement, I am returning another promise, which means that I can chain another then statement and then get the response from that. And if I've done everything correctly, I should get the value number 2 returned to me, because here number has the value of 1. We then increment that by 1, and that's going to be passed to this response. And we exactly get that value. So last but not least, let's also try to go through a practical example. So I'm going to create another file here. Where I'm going to attempt to recreate the code that we saw earlier that uses the callback L and that demonstrated how this pyramid of doom looks like when you are calling a lot of callbacks. So I'm just going to implement the read directory method using promises. So here I created a readDir function where I'm going to return a new promise, and I'm using the built-in read directory method from the FS, which is the Node.js file system, where I pass in the path. I then pass in a callback here, and Node.js uses error first callbacks. If there's an error, I'm going to reject my promise, and if there are no errors, I'm going to resolve my promise with the result. So we can actually go ahead and test this, and don't forget, you still need to go and target ES6. And what I get back is a list of files from the temp folder.